And thanks so much for tuning into this interview on the Campaign Corner. I'm joined with Victor Garcia da Rosa, who is running as a Republican in Florida's District 21, which goes from Palm Beach and part of Broward County. He is running up against the incumbent Democrat Lois Frankel. Victor, pleasure to have you here. How are you?
I'm very well, Ann. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So this is a pretty interesting race. You've got some interesting candidates that have jumped into this race. Lois Frankel was elected in 2016. She's got a big purse, arguably the biggest money maker out there right now. She's got what, $1.2 million to
$1.2 million to work with right now.
Yeah, that's a significant war chest for a race down here. You know, to what do you attribute the high enthusiasm of the most recent candidates jumping in for this Republican primary?
I think it's probably just most of the constituents within this district are kind of like tired of the status quo. Okay. I think a lot of them are very upset in the last election cycle. The powers that be decided not to put forth a candidate, and Lois Frankel, she basically won another 2 years as a representative for this district without a single vote. She ran unopposed.
And why do you think the Republicans didn't put a candidate up against Lois Frankel in 2018?
They don't want to put forth the money. They feel that it's a lost cause. I mean, it's a D+9 district.
Right.
So, yeah, the challenges are great, but I'm a firm believer in that, you know, if nothing is done, nothing will change. And that's what I'm looking to do here. I'm looking to bring about a change for this district, and not only just for this district, but for the United States as a whole.
Do you think that the president's re-election for 2020, his bid, and going back up against the cast of characters we're seeing on the left, is the more significant reason why people are now jumping in, hopefully to get on his coattails a little bit?
I can't speak for others. That's not the reason why I decided to run. The reason why I decided to run was the fact that I found it reprehensible that Lois Frankel won an election without a single vote. So I decided back in November that I'm going to run. I actually did wait until the 5th of February, which is the day that President Trump gave his last State of the Union address. That was the day that I actually filed.
Great. All right, so let's get into some of the issues here, because you know there's a lot of things that Floridians are concerned about. Finances is always one of them, our water problem, constitutional subjects such as felons being able to vote, amendments that passed in the last election, things like that. But I want to hear from you, you know, if you were to prioritize the issues that you think are significant in District 21, what would they be? And starting with the top.
I would have to say, I mean, overall, in general, my biggest concern is about bringing the government back to we the people. We have powers that be that are in Washington, D.C. that have decided to take us well away from what our founding fathers had intended. When we take a look at the preamble, there are 5 key issues in the preamble. It's to establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Well, and you and I are their posterity.
That's
and
right.
Anything that I seek to do, not only in my candidacy, but once I actually make it to Washington, D.C., is to bring the government back to we the people, and anything will have to be look through the eyes of those 5 key principles in the preamble. If it does not fit within those 5 keys, it'll be a no vote for me.
Okay, so let's talk about the recent hubbubs here on the Second Amendment. Sadly, we've had mass shootings. You know, this is not something new. We've had this problem for a long time. In fact, the Boston Massacre during the Revolutionary War period was a mass shooting. So this is not an unusual thing. It's just a horrible thing. The president made some statements regarding red flag laws and looking into the, you know, people's mental health. He thinks that's a real challenge. If you were to prioritize our Second Amendment and how we can safeguard one another from people that are going to commit these heinous crimes, how would you characterize that?
Well, I would characterize it like this. Anytime that a human life is lost, it's sad. It should never occur, especially when somebody decides to go ahead willfully to take another life. With the latest mass shootings, it kind of takes it up a couple of notches. Okay, as it relates to mental issue, I believe that we can't infringe upon the rights of law-abiding citizens. Okay, Second Amendment is very, very clear. That right to bear arms shall not be infringed. I look at it this way, Ann. Again, when a human life is lost, it's horrible. But people don't talk about the fact that each and every year, people taking Tylenol, there's about 38,000 people a year that die from Tylenol. Nobody's talking about it. People aren't talking about the roughly 60 shootings that occurred this past weekend in Chicago, 60 persons that were actually shot, and there were somewhere in the neighborhood between 9 and 12 people actually lost their lives. These are things that are happening on a daily basis. Now let's take a look at gun control. Chicago has one of the greatest gun control limitations in the country, and look what it's done. It hasn't actually saved the population. It's actually put the population at risk.
That's a fact that unfortunately gets proven over and over again. Baltimore, Chicago, any of the cities with the strictest gun control seem to show evidence of that. Let's put this in the context of school safety. Parkland happened in our backyard. Andrew Pollack has been out working diligently to provide safety and to get, I guess, policies passed that'll protect children, what he believes is going to be very key in safeguarding our kids. Where do you stand in terms of the recent changes he's been able to affect with the help of the president and with the help of the governor, as opposed to, what you think should be done now to protect our kids? And, do you believe that we should have teachers carrying guns if they so choose to step up and do so, or should that be managed by somebody else, maybe retired military or hired security guards?
Well, getting back to Parkland, it was a comedy of errors that actually led up to the actual shooting itself. Okay, there were a number of things within the school district and within the sheriff's office down there. They basically just dropped the ball. Okay, moving forward, I am all about a citizen's right to be able to bear arms. If a teacher decides they want to be able to bear arms within the classroom, be able to protect their students, I'm all for it. I'm a little bit more leaning towards, though, school resource officers, adequate numbers to be able to safely take care of the children that are there, and private individuals, whether it be a military veteran that has retired, that wants to go and volunteer their time. I think that would be a great way to be able to bring about school safety. And again, measures to where, if a child or a student has done something poor, if they've done something badly, to not just sweep it underneath the carpet and hope that it goes away. I mean, take a look at Nicholas Cruz. That's exactly what happened. We cannot allow things like that to ever happen again.
So since we're on the subject of education, let's talk about, school choice, vouchers, being able to fund kids to go to private school. What is your position on education with respect to options that can be provided to the students here in Florida?
Well, when it relates to, school choice, I'm all for school choice. I'm a firm believer that when you give people choices, that makes the choices they have even better. I'm a product of private education. Not that my parents were extremely rich. We grew up in a very nice neighborhood. We were fortunate enough that the school that I attended had a policy to where if 2 children went to school paying full tuition, the rest of the children in the family were able to go for free. Well, I have 5 brothers and 3 sisters, so my parents kind of scored on that one.
Right.
If you take a look at, around the nation, you take a look at areas where they do have school vouchers available, okay? Not only has it made it better for those that are actually attending those schools, but the public schools have done much better. Why? They've kind of been forced to because they're losing funding as people are deciding to take these vouchers and utilize them in private schools. So the key is education first and foremost, okay? But more importantly is giving the parents the choice to send their children to where they want to send them, where they have a better opportunity to be able to have a better education, to have a better life down the road.
What about the constitutionality of educating illegal aliens, children of illegal aliens in this country? Do we have to educate them, or how would you handle that?
Well, how I would handle it is, and if you're here illegally, you're breaking the law. You should not be here. You should not be afforded any rights if you're engaged in an ongoing illegal activity. It's good. As an example, if a father decides to go ahead and routinely rob a store or rob a bank, there are certain rights that he's going to go ahead and lose. Okay? If somebody chooses to come to this country illegally, they do not have a right to anything other than to be detained, to be tried, and to be deported.
All right, let's talk about job creation. What can you do, or what would you propose to help increase the companies moving into the area and creating more jobs? What sort of legislation or tax abatement, what would you consider enticing to bring more business to South Florida?
Well, first and foremost, if you look at the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that was enacted at the behest of our president, Donald J. Trump, that has done a phenomenal job of actually boosting the economy. What I seek to do is to bring forth legislation that will make that permanent. Because the reality is between 2020 and 2025, little by little by little, aspects of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will go away, and ultimately in 2025 they'll go away completely. I love the idea of what the president is doing by wanting to entice businesses that have gone foreign, okay, to bring them back here. I don't know if you realize this, Ann, but manufacturing in an economy, okay, has a net gain much greater than a service industry. Now, you need to have service, but the important thing is we need to bring the manufacturing back here. One of the things that one of my most trusted advisors in my campaign, Daniel, and I had an opportunity to be able to speak with a gentleman out of Virginia as it relates to Gen 4 nuclear, which is an incredible technology that is sustainable, okay, and it's something that could actually be done here in Florida. We're also speaking with people that are in the tech industry to bring more tech here to South Florida. Very
interesting. Tell me a little more about this Gen 4 nuclear technology. Is it a nuclear power plant? What sort of?
Yeah, basically what it is, it's a nuclear power plant that doesn't produce any nuclear waste. It's actually able to utilize its own waste.
Interesting.
Okay? It's not going to be susceptible to a Chernobyl style of meltdown. Okay, and the reality is, if you take a Coca-Cola can, which is about 355 milliliters of liquid, that's the amount of nuclear energy that an individual, myself, you, and all of you that are listening here today and watching here today, that's all you would ever need throughout a lifetime to be able to provide all the energy needs that you have, whether it be in your home, whether it be in your automobile. And the nice thing about it, again, it takes the nuclear waste and it reuses it to be able to produce more energy.
That's interesting. I had not heard of that before. Fascinating. Well, we learned something here in the campaign corner. That's tremendous. All right, I want to address the subject of medical marijuana, and this is coming straight out of DeSantis' office. Going into the session, DeSantis essentially gave lawmakers an offer they couldn't refuse. He sought to eliminate a ban on the smokable medical marijuana. If lawmakers didn't act, DeSantis threatened to drop an appeal of a court ruling that said that the smoking ban included in a 2017 law was unconstitutional. So lawmakers quickly went along with DeSantis' request and eliminated the ban back in March. What are your thoughts about medical marijuana and the governor's position?
Well, as it relates to medical marijuana, for myself personally, the recreational use of medical marijuana, I'm against for myself personally. I can't tell somebody else whether they want to do it or not. That's a choice they're going to need to make. As it relates to medical use of marijuana, if there is verifiable evidence through studies that there can be an actual impact to improve the health and, more importantly, the quality of life of someone that may be going through chemotherapy. I myself, I suffer from ulcerative colitis, okay, inflammatory bowel disease. Technically, I would qualify to be able to have a medical marijuana card. The problem I have with that is, if, let's say, I decided to utilize that benefit, my Second Amendment rights will be taken away, because here in the state of Florida, if you get a medical marijuana card, you're prevented from purchasing a firearm and getting a concealed weapons permit. As it relates to the aspect of Governor DeSantis saying it's unconstitutional not to allow smokable forms of marijuana, well, he's right. The Constitution does allow for something like that. And again, I'm about bringing the government back to we the people, not only here on a federal level, but here as a state level. If the Constitution is written in such a way, okay, that's going to impede upon the rights of individuals, I am for the Constitution.
All right. As we get ready to wrap up here, a couple more questions, and we're going to end on the Republican Party of Florida. There's a little some news-making stuff happening over there, but I want to talk about the water here in Florida, because that really has been an ongoing issue for us living in South Florida. We're either facing water shortages, or we're getting polluted water, or it's a combination of all the above. Governor DeSantis recently basically changed out the entire South Florida Water Management Board and has made some sweeping changes there, and has required a lot of money to help clean up our waterways. What can you contribute in terms of ideas, legislation, technology to augment what he's doing?
Well, as it relates to the water issue here in Florida, you look at two great things here in the state of Florida. The economy in Florida is actually driven by two primary forces. One is tourism, and second is agriculture. We had the algae blooms last year that adversely affected our tourism, right, going from Martin County all the way down to Miami-Dade. That cost the state hundreds of millions of dollars of tourism dollars. There are industries that actually reside within our state that are culpable as it is related to the algae blooms and the runoff. I'm a firm believer that we need to hold those companies liable and accountable, and we need to look to them to not only come up with measures to ensure that we're not going to have issues with our water, but more importantly, for them to be able to put forth the monies to be able to put forth a cleanup of it.
Isn't that kind of what we were doing with sugar for a long time? And what happened there? They were able to maintain and fund lobbyists to continue to business as usual. Is that really something you think is going to work by trying to hold the companies accountable? Because we've yet to see Big Sugar really be held accountable.
I think it's a matter of, well, it's interesting that you mentioned, lobbyists. I'm not going to take a single dollar from lobbying groups. Maybe the only one I'll take money from once we get into the general election will be the NRA, because I firmly believe in our Second Amendment rights.
Right.
But as it relates to Big Sugar or any other lobbying groups, the reality is again, I want to bring the government back to we the people. Okay. Unfortunately, when someone goes to Washington, D.C., and especially their very first year within office, is when they actually start their re-election campaign. They're really not legislating. They're actually giving an ear to the lobbyists.
Right.
What I seek to do is to give an ear to my constituents. And what I will legislate will be in the best interest of our constituents. And yes, we will hold Big Sugar, you mentioned it, accountable. And it's a matter of, people being willing that are serving in Washington, D.C. to put the interests of the constituents first over lobbyists.
All right. As we wrap up here, let's talk about the Republican Party of Florida. Joe Gruters is the president and chairman of the RPOF. There's been controversy about some of the bills that he's tried to bring forth in terms of abortion, in terms of transgenders bathrooms. What is your position in terms of trying to gain support from RPOF? Do you support what they're doing at the top and leadership of RPOF? And if not, why?
Again, I guess the best way that I could be able to answer this for you, Ann, is everything goes back to what my campaign motto is. Bring the government back to we the people. Whether it be a political organization, the RPOF, whether it be the Republican Party of Palm Beach, whether it be the Republican Party, whether it be the Republican National Convention, the NRCC, for me it doesn't matter what they have to say. What matters to me is what the Constitution says. And what I'm able to bring forth for my constituents here in District 21, but more importantly, to be able to bring to every single citizen that resides in our great nation.
So in closing, why should voters, and speak to the voters, why should they pick you over the other options that they're going to be presented with in the primary?
Well, I would have to say first and foremost, and I can't be bought. Yeah, I'm not a billionaire like our president is, but I do have resources. I've dedicated my whole life, the last 26 years, to consulting. I've consulted in the environmental services, pest control industry. I consulted in retail, and I'm currently consulting in the hospitality industry. Tourism is very, very important to me. That's kind of one of the other things that kind of drives me in this particular race here in this district, because tourism is so important. But one of the things I'm going to be able to bring to the table is the fact that when a company hires me as a consultant, I do two things primarily. I increase their revenues and I cut their costs. And going into Washington, D.C., what we need to be able to not necessarily increase revenues by way of increasing taxes. We need to increase revenues through a tax base by having more workers out there earning a better income, which ultimately will benefit the tax income that's coming in, but more importantly, to be able to cut out the fat. Just like in a company, our government wastes a lot of money. And what I would do is I put forth legislation, first and foremost, a balanced budget. And you and I, we both live within a budget.
Have to.
If I have $100 coming in, what I do first and foremost, I go ahead and I set 10% aside in case there's going to be an emergency down the road. And then I live within the means of that $90. I'm not going to go out and borrow $100,000 knowing they've only got $90 a month or $90 a week coming in. I'm going to live within my budget. The unfortunate thing, when people are dealing with other people's money, they kind of lose sight of the fact that they need to treat it as if it was their own money.
That's right.
Okay, and that's what I'm going to bring when I make it to Washington, D.C. is I'm going to bring accountability, but more importantly, I'm going to cut the waste.
Okay, well, I think that sums it up here. Thank you so much for stopping by the Campaign Corner today, Victor.
Thank you very much, Ann.
Good luck
Pleasure.
out there. Good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you so much, folks.